What a roller coaster of emotions the disciples must have felt as they followed Jesus. With 2,000 years of hindsight, we get what was going on, but the disciples were working this through on the hoof. And they would have been really shocked when Jesus said this: "I must go to Jerusalem and suffer much from the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law. I will be put to death." No wonder Peter said, "God forbid it, Lord, that must never happen to you." Peter had spent months with Jesus, watching him heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, cure the blind, and raise the dead. And now, Jesus was talking about his future in terms of weakness and vulnerability. Peter didn't want that. He wanted Jesus to be a strong and powerful Messiah. But the problem is, we see strength from a human perspective, not from a divine perspective. We think strength is the same thing as might. We think strength is victory. But for God, strength is measured in vulnerability, in sacrifice. That was the example Jesus was showing his disciples, and that's how he wants us to live our lives too. Jesus said, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me." We trivialise that call on our lives. We've all got a cross to bear. It trips off the tongue so easily. But it is an incredible call on our lives from the man who was walking towards Jerusalem to be tortured and hung on a cross to die. I wonder if Peter felt let down at this point. Until then, there was a glamour in following Jesus. He was hanging out with the coolest superhero in Israel. The crowds flocked to them, the miracles never stopped coming, the teaching was amazing, and no doubt Peter enjoyed bathing in the reflected glory of Jesus. But now, that all changes. The glamour is gone, and Peter is left with the cold, stark reality of the pain of discipleship and the agony of realizing that if he truly wants to follow Jesus, he can't have it all on his own terms. There is a real cost to discipleship, and it hurts. It's an uncomfortable truth, but it is a truth governed by the knowledge that, as Jesus says here, those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. So this is a passage about our life and our identity. Where do we find our identity? If we find our identity in our own preferences and comfort zones, then we will lose our identity because we live in an impermanent world. But if we find our identity, our life solely in Christ, we will save our identity because Christ is eternal. We need to lay aside the things of the ego and allow God to be at work in us, to desire less of us and more of God. We have to die to self so that God can live in us. As Jesus says, "Those who lose their life for my sake will find it." For Jesus and for us, there is a Good Friday to go through. For Jesus and for us, there is crucifixion and resurrection to go through. But we know how the story ends. The Messiah will ascend to the heavens, taking his splintered and scarred body into the presence of the Father, where he will be glorified for all eternity. I wonder if we can be courageous enough to embrace the splinters and the scarring and the pain of ego death and self-sacrifice, knowing that we too will be resurrected in Christ and brought into the presence of the Father for all eternity. As Jesus says in this passage, "For the Son of Man is to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay everyone for what he's done." Our Messiah suffered, but he overcame and was acknowledged by his Father in heaven. You may feel that your life is difficult today, but we rejoice in the splinter marks of the cross. And if we remain steadfast, we too will overcome, and our name will be acknowledged before the Father and his holy angels.